So a couple of days ago, I spoke to a friend of mine who's working in compliance at a telecom company, and it was interesting. He kind of explained to me the ins and outs of his job and that he has to listen to a bunch of phone calls from their customer service department to make sure that the agents remain compliant to the rules set out by the company. And my argument was that his job could probably be replaced by AI quite easily. He thought otherwise, and I thought, just for fun, to test out the hypothesis. So what we're going to do today, we're going to actually check out some telephone calls. We're not going to really listen to a lot of it, but they are really genuine calls, genuine calls that happen between customer service departments and fictional clients. And we're going to see how AI can help determine whether things remain compliant, how it can summarize the conversations, and so forth. So without any further ado, let's take a look. In our typical fashion, we're going to take a look at how the system works. Then we're going to take a look at how the database is set up, and then we're going to take a look at how the automation is pieced together. Everything is fairly straightforward. There's nothing really major happening. In fact, it's too easy to do this sort of process. So let's get into it. What we have is just two calls. I'm not gonna tell you immediately what kind of calls they are. I want us to see together what kind of call each call is and what has happened and how well it has deconstructed this recording. So let's press the process button and let's see what happens. It takes a few seconds because this is a 5-minute call and this one is, I believe, 9 minutes. So depending on the length of the conversation, it might take longer or shorter. Here we go. So this was a sales call. We can have the full transcription of the call. Then we have who the agent was, Jeff, who the client was. The client at some point also gave us an email. Let's see. There you go. And could you please verify your email address? It's bellaanthony@yahoo.com. It's all one word. Excellent. So you can see how OpenAI has given us exactly the email from the transcription. Next, we have the abstract, which is like a little summary of the transcription. Jeff from Equality Munderford, line, contacts, okay. Computer engineering, all right. In plumbing and okay. Makes sense. Cool. Compliance check. Yes, and let's see what the compliance says. Call was handled in a professional, transparent manner by Jeff, who introduced himself and the company, clarified the purpose. He respected Anthony's time, convenient time for a follow-up. Excellent. Also ensured Anthony handled securely without sharing it inappropriately. Excellent. So that is looking really good. Let's take a look at the other example. Okay, here we go. Cool. So the transcription for call number 1 is in. Again, it's a sales call. The agent name is Donna, and we have the full transcription of the call. Very nice. Client name Carolyn Lake. We have the full email address, brief abstract. So somebody wants to cancel their subscription to avoid a monthly fee. Okay, and then Carolyn agrees to an 80% discount. Perfect. Compliance check, no. So this call didn't pass compliance. Let's see why. Call compliance was breached as Donna offered her personal employee discount to keep Carolyn from canceling the subscription. That is big red flag. This is against the guidelines which stipulate not to share employee discounts to close a sale. Apart from these, she respected Carolyn's decisions, showed understanding, and attempted to provide a satisfactory resolution. So it all looks very well and good. Let's take a look at how the database is set up. All right, so the database is super straightforward. As you can see, we're really not using much here. We just have one single table where I'm keeping all my call recordings. There is a simple text for the name. There is the trigger for our automation, which we'll talk in a sec. There is the client link, which, right now I'm not really using it for much, but we could potentially, based on the email, look up our list of clients and see if they exist and link this call back to the client. But ultimately, the rest of the fields are very straightforward. There is the field where we store our recordings, just a simple attachment field, nothing fancy. Then we have a simple text for the type of call, a long text for the transcription of the call, the agent name, again, just simple text throughout for agent name, client email, the abstract, the compliance check, which is always a yes or no, and the notes, which help us understand why something passed compliance or didn't pass compliance. That's it in terms of database design. Let's take a look at how the automation is set up. Okay, so time for the automation. Now, I've included a link below for you to get your hands on the make scenario that I'm about to showcase right now. You don't necessarily have to get it, but ultimately it's there if you want to have your own copy. Otherwise, follow along with this video and you'll get there with me live. First and foremost, we need a trigger. And to do that, what we need to do, we need to jump into our automations. Then I've created an automation here, and if you're familiar with the channel, you know that we've been using exactly the same trigger forever, or at least the same triggering process forever. First step, that is a trigger where we usually trigger something with like a little checkbox. And in our case, the table is client details. The condition is when the processed checkmark is checked. Then we run our favorite script that looks something like this. The only thing that you might need to do, not might, for sure will need to do, is replace this webhook with the one that Make gives you when you create the scenario. From there, as soon as you replace that, don't forget to add an input variable, just like I've done it here. Capital R underscore capital I lowercase d, like follow this to the T. And then we have our mapped Airtable record ID value. So just press on the blue button and map this Airtable record ID field in there. And that's it. Press finish editing. Turn this on, and you're done with setting your trigger. Now, let's take a look at the make automation that's at play. Essentially, it's kind of straightforward. What we have here could be like broken down into a couple of parts. So this is our trigger portion. This is where we deal with downloading that file. Then this portion over here deals with getting all the compliance data in. Let me just explain this part as well. So in my database, one thing I forgot to mention is that we have our compliance requirements. They are like tucked into this little table. Again, nothing really special in terms of design. It's just that for sales calls, I have some compliance guidelines, very basic stuff like avoid misleading or exaggerating claims about products and services, basic things. And then refund calls, technical support calls, and basically all of these types of calls have got some guidelines that the agent needs to adhere to. This part over here basically takes care of grabbing all of these requirements and creating one big text out of all the requirements. Then this is where the magic happens. We have number one, where the transcription of the call that happens using Whisper. And again, super easy. We're just mapping this in. That creates the transcription of the call in a very nice, succinct manner. Then we have our transform text to a structured data, which is a module that I've covered a little bit in the past, but I've never actually used the module. We performed an API call back in the day, but now this has been turned into a proper module, so it's a little bit easier to work with instead of creating HTTP calls to OpenAI. And what this does, in essence, is you'll see. I'll explain things shortly, and then we finally just update that call record with all the data that we've collected from the previous modules. Our trigger comes along and we get our record, and it's mapped like so. Lead management, client calls, and then we have our record ID that comes in through the trigger. Then what we do is we download the URL. So you just map the client recording URL back into this HTTP module, and that's that. Then we perform a search of the compliance requirements. And again, this is like super straightforward. Just search all the records. I'm not doing any filtering. I'm not doing any of that. It's just as is. Then that creates the big text that I've just shown you. Very straightforward. Again, I'm just mapping the compliance guidelines over here. The row separator is just a new row. Again, super straightforward. And then moving on, we transcribe the call. Again, just will be pre-mapped to HTTP almost by default, if I remember correctly. And you can also choose your model. There's Whisper 1. You don't really have to have a prompt in there. I didn't, so it worked. This is probably the most difficult part of the whole automation, where we need to create a bit of an elongated prompt to ChatGPT. So first of all, we need to choose a model, right? I've chosen ChatGPT Turbo. You can choose ChatGPT 4. It's up to you, but I would say ChatGPT Turbo is best right now, purely because you might have a big text to deal with, depending, of course, on the length of the call. From there, we have the first prompt, which basically tells ChatGPT what is happening, right? We're looking to extract some key information and so forth. Then, this is the most challenging bit, where we have to provide with a bunch of items. And the way that you do it, you first need to create a parameter name, let's say client_name, and you have some rules that you need to adhere to down here. So it can't just be like client, space name. No, it has to be with underscores. I'm not sure if you're allowed to have capital letters, but anyway, bottom line is that you have to adhere to some rules here. Then we have the description, the name of the client, preferably first and last name. And then you have to say, it's a data type text. And then it would be ideal if you can give some examples. The more examples you give, the better, the more refined your answers will be from a ChatGPT. So essentially, at this point, we have just these values from the system. From there, we are looking at the second item, the client email. So as you can see, you basically have to give all of these items that you're looking to map into the client calls. You just have to line them out and explain to ChatGPT what you're basically looking for. So let's go through them. I've gone through item 1. Let's take a look at item 2. Client email, the email of the client, if it was collected by the customer service representative, data type text, and I'm just giving it an example, john.doe@example.com. Item 3 is agent name, the customer service representative who took the call with the client. Again, just data type text and Mike as the example. Item 4, call abstract, a brief abstract of the call transcript that can give us insight about the call. Perfect. And then I'm basically giving it a brief abstract example. Then we have a call compliant, yes or no, decision about whether or not the call was compliant based on the rules of the company. And you see here, I'm mapping that big text of rules so that it knows what the rules are. And then I'm giving it the data text type and the example response of no. Finally, the compliance check notes is a description of why you took the yes/no decision about compliance. We need to know why exactly this call was breached. If it did, please give us as much details as possible, what the agent did right, and comment on what the agent could have done better during this call. I didn't provide any examples here, but the data type is text. The type of call, what kind of call was this? Sales call, refund call, and so forth. Again, just data type text. And that's it. Actually, I don't think you even need to run it. As soon as you place these variables in, I believe the module will generate these little data points so you can map them without even running this. But I would say, ideally, run this at least once so that you see that the prompts perform well, and then just map everything out, kind of like I have in here. We have client calls, the table, then we are updating the record that we were dealing with in the beginning, and then finally, the type of call, the type of call from ChatGPT. Transcription, the transcription from module number 3. Agent name, and basically this is kind of self-explanatory, I feel. And that's it. That's all there is to it. As soon as this process gets completed, we get all of our data mapped into Airtable. From there, whoever is dealing with your compliance will be able to filter this data, slice it, dice it, and do what he has to do. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, do subscribe to the channel now so that you don't miss any future uploads. Let me know in the comments below if you've enjoyed this particular demo. I think this is one of the great cases to use AI for internal operations. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Thanks.